welcome to After Alexander, Episode 9, The Next Generation. As with last time, this is going to be a digression episode, where we explore something that won't directly come up in the main narrative. Specifically, I'm going to examine the second generation of Seleucid royals, the children of Seleucus and Apama. Be warned that there's quite a bit of uncertainty, with names and question marks flying around everywhere. So, there's necessarily going to be a certain scarcity of source material that I can find, but I'm going to do my best to discuss what I've been able to find. It's going to be a shorter episode than usual, but I thought it was probably necessary to focus on the topic in more detail in this episode, as it's likely that we otherwise wouldn't come back to the topic in suitable depth. Then, next time, we'll get around to discussing the events surrounding and succeeding the Indian campaigns of Seleucus when the former empire is plunged back into war. Anyway, as we discussed, Seleucus was married to Apama at the mass weddings at Susa in 324. Apama was the daughter of a man called Spitamenes. Her father was, along with Oxyates, one of the two principal lords of the Eastern Empire. Seleucus' marriage to her seems to indicate how favoured he was by Alexander the Great. In fact, a later myth would develop which jumps on the Hellenistic bandwagon of connecting yourself by familial ties back to Alexander the Great. For further details, see Cassander's boast to be Alexander's brother-in-law, as well as Ptolemy's claims that he was in fact a half-brother of his by Philip II. Apama would accordingly later be claimed as a daughter of Alexander the Great and Roxanne, who was herself made out to be the daughter of the last Achaemenid king, Darius III. Given the fact that there already was a legend that Alexander and Roxanne had had another child, although this admittedly included the detail that the child had died, which would likely have been dismissed as a minor detail, and that Apama was herself related to the Achaemenid royal house, this could easily have been believed at the time. Although we can look back at it with hindsight and sneer, this myth would have added legitimacy points to the Seleucid scorecard, which is always a good thing if you're running a dynasty. Anyway, on to the children. First, we've got to discuss Antiochus, the heir to Seleucus' domains and his eldest son. Antiochus was born in 324, which means he was born remarkably quickly after the mass weddings at Susa in February. If we assume his mother carried him to term, then he would probably, by my best guess, have been born around November or else at the turn of the year. He was named for his paternal grandfather, Antiochus, who had been one of the generals of Philip II of Macedon. This does seem to me to suggest a genuine affection Seleucus held for his father. After all, he had founded 16 cities called Antioch. However, be aware that I might be superimposing modern sensibilities onto Seleucus which don't exist. Anyway, regardless, Antiochus the Younger was born around the end of 324. This means that, at the time of his father becoming king in 305, he will have been approximately 18 or 19. There is one other confirmed son of Seleucus called Achaeus. I haven't seen a confirmed date of birth listed for him, although basic biology does indicate he would have had to have been born after mid-323 at the least. When I looked him up on my search engine, various unreliable genealogy sources kept throwing the year 320 BC at me for some reason. However, I've not seen this anywhere else, so I'm going to ignore it and I'm just noting it as a possibility of his date of birth for completeness. Achaeus' descendants are going to come up again in our story, so it's worth keeping him in the back of your mind for the time being. This next section is essentially a list of different sources where I've seen different children listed, but I'm going to simplify. There are 3 daughters mentioned in addition to these 2 sons, Laodike, Berenike, and Apama. 2 of these daughters would have been named for their paternal grandmother and their mother respectively, which seems to make sense. This Berenike is probably the one speculated to have married Chandragupta during her father's treaty with the Mauryan Empire. However, there is an additional daughter, Helena, listed in the quick information at the top of Seleucus I's Wikipedia article. As far as I can tell, Helena doesn't appear anywhere else, so I'm not entirely sure where that's come from, and so I'm going to stick with these 3 as confirmed. Other than that, there's not really too much information about Seleucus's daughters. I haven't even been able to find dates of birth, in fact. We don't, however, appear to yet be in the age where Seleucid princesses are married off to foreign powers, with the possible exception of Berenike. Now, again, some more speculation on my part. The fact that Berenike was married off rather than either of the other 2 confirmed daughters might indicate that she was the oldest, but that's pure speculation on my part. I'm not sure whether there would be a naming custom similar to naming Antiochus for his grandfather, so I can't really comment on whether the names of the princesses would indicate which was born first. It's basically all a question mark as far as I can see. I'm going to stick with these 5 children of Seleucus and Apama the Elder: Antiochus, Achaeus, Berenike, Laodike, and Apama the Younger. There will be a second marriage and at least one daughter Phyla that Seleucus has later in life, with the according political marriages going on that seem to be somewhat lacking in the first batch of children. However, as this plotline is going to be immediately relevant to Antiochus' story in a few years' time, I'm going to leave a discussion of it for when Antiochus eventually accedes to sole power in 281 BCE. Most presciently for our narrative, Antiochus is now old enough that he can take part in the political story. In fact, he will be present at the showdown between the successors which will take place in 301 BCE, which I've been hinting at for some time now, the battle at Ipsus. With that said, next time we'll be getting back to our narrative. I've had to allude to quite a few websites for this episode, but that's mainly because there's so little source material I've been able to find to talk about concerning the children of Seleucus and Apama. I'm just going to stress it again. Bear in mind there are some question marks here, but I'm going to stay with these 5, as it seems most confirmed out of what I've read. In the meantime, thank you for listening. You can contact the show at afteralexpod@gmail.com, that again, afteralexpod@gmail.com, for any questions or comments. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.